All right, let's wrap up this series of 70s and 80s comedies that I got commissioned to do. And this last one was actually my choice. Now, after really not liking some of the last ones that I did, like Police Academy, and irritatingly, really not liking the first Naked Gun, which was a shame because I remember liking it at a younger age. But my first instinct on this was to do a palate cleanser with an 80s comedy that I knew I liked. Like, my gut instinct was to watch Jumping Jack Flash with Whoopi Goldberg. If you've never seen that, I remember thinking it's great, and I think it's probably still good. I don't know. I didn't end up doing that one. I mean, you've seen the title of the video. You already know what I did. So I opted instead to sort of keep in the vein of what I had been specifically commissioned to watch and check out another Zucker Brothers and Abrams joint. And one that I hadn't seen before, and one that is distinctly different from most of their other work, especially the stuff that I looked at. So I saw Ruthless People, which I knew very little about, had never seen before. And it's very odd to me that this is a Zucker film. Because the first thing is, they didn't write the script. And you can kind of tell. Not that, like, I understand why the script appealed to them. It's close enough to their sensibilities that I get why, when the script was handed to them, they decided to make it. That actually tracks for me. But it's just darker and a little meaner than they tended to be around this time. Now, that's not to say that their stuff couldn't get dark, but it was usually in a edgy, pushing at the boundaries way. This, like, at its fundamental core is a dark idea. And it actually kind of makes me think that they weren't a great pick to direct, because the directing style is very much in the vein of how they directed other stuff, which is with a very light hand. Because by and large, and this worked very much with scripts like Airplane especially, but, you know, even the ones I didn't like as much, like Naked Gun, where the jokes come so fast, it's better not to get fancy with the directing and just let the jokes speak for themselves. Here, we have an actual narrative story with characters that we stick with the whole way through, who actually have, some of them have standard character arcs and all this other stuff, and it probably would have benefited from a director with a little bit more of a clear directorial touch and a little bit of visual flair to what they do. Actually, truth be told, this would have been a really good movie for Danny DeVito to direct. And I actually wonder, to a certain extent, if he thought the same thing. Because he's in this, and I know I haven't gotten into the specifics of this yet, but the way that it's dark, it makes a lot of sense to me that the next year, Danny DeVito would make his own feature film directorial debut with Throw Mama from the Train, and then 2 years later, he'd make War of the Roses. Like, I have to wonder if he came away from Ruthless People going, I could have handled that material better, and then found similarly dark core concept comedies. But anyway, I haven't even said what the concept of this one is. We open with Danny DeVito giving the backstory of his marriage, which is that his father-in-law, he found out, was dying, so he immediately rushed into a marriage with a woman that he does not like and never has, so that the father-in-law would die and he could have access to that money. And the guy held on forever. And now he's finally gone, and now the guy wants to get rid of his wife. Like, permanently get rid of her. That's his plan. He intends to kill his wife. And what ends up happening is his wife, played by Bette Midler, gets kidnapped by just a couple of fairly ordinary people who are just in dire straits, and one of them a bit bitter. And those being played by Judd Hirsch and Helen Slater. And so when Danny DeVito gets the call, give us money or we'll kill your wife, as far as he's concerned, he just hit the jackpot. Not only does he not want her back, he wants them to kill her. So that's your basic premise. And that's what I mean by, like, that fundamentally, it's not about dark individual jokes. That's a dark premise for a film and for a comedy. And this is a movie that is really largely carried by the cast. That's not to say that the jokes don't work in and of themselves. I think some of them do, but a lesser cast that didn't know how to sell these characters, this could have gotten real grating real fast, because it's not easy. I mean, like, you can cite examples where it's done well, but there's a lot more examples where it doesn't work, where you have a cast made up pretty much entirely by either horrible people, complete idiots, or both. And this is ultimately a farce of awful and incompetent people. That, you know, there are people who just are terrible as human beings. That's a decent chunk of the cast. The ones that aren't terrible are incompetent in one way or another. Either in general, with characters like the one Bill Pullman plays, who's just the guy doesn't have two brain cells, and then you have people who aren't that kind of like, nothing going on upstairs, but they are completely incompetent at what they're trying to do, like with the two people doing the kidnapping. Like, they have no business doing that. So they're incompetent at what they're doing as they try and get money from a horrible human being who would rather they just kill his wife. And it's this dark farce. And if the characters are not interesting to watch, then it's very easy to disengage from a setup like that. Like, there aren't that many people to root for. By the end, the story does develop a few characters in a direction where eventually you can root for them. But certainly at the start and for most of the movie, you're like, am I supposed to like any of these people? And the answer is, at least initially, not really. And if you're going to do that, it's a big risk if you don't get a cast that can sell it. Thankfully, this one does. Like, Danny DeVito especially, it was real smart to open the movie with him. He is amazing for parts like this. Was then, is now. He's, like, Danny DeVito is one of those actors with a very strange form of charisma. Like, when you think charismatic, people tend to think almost like classically handsome and charming. You know, your Cary Grants, your George Clooney's, or even like a slightly more less traditionally dashing kind of charisma that, you know, people still you get from somebody like Pedro Pascal. But like, Danny DeVito has a charisma about him for the simple fact that it's really difficult to take your eyes off him. Like, he commands attention, he commands the camera, and he'll do it while just being an odd little man saying terrible things. He's really good for this. I feel like Bette Midler might be a bit underutilized, if I'm being completely honest. Like, she's good for what she's asked to do, but she's not asked to do much. There were times where it reminded me of another 80s comedy that she was in that I haven't seen in a while, but I did historically like, called Outrageous Fortune, which also kind of has a weird farcical, not as dark as this, but a weird farcical nature to it. But yeah, it doesn't feel like it takes proper advantage of Bette Midler. Again, she gets a couple scenes to shine, but for the most part, yeah, no, she's fine. I expected a lot more out of her, given that she's pretty high billing on this, but yeah, not completely wasted, but underutilized. That's the word for her in this. As for Judge Reinhold, I might have said Judd Hirsch earlier. I don't know why. Judge Reinhold. As for him and Helen Slater fades a little into the background, but I don't think that's a problem with her. The character's kind of designed to be a bit mousy and to fade into the background a little bit. Whereas Judge Reinhold, he very early on just gives a very good sense of who this guy is. He is a nice guy trying to be a mean guy because he has realized that the mean people win. The mean people succeed. They get the money. They get what they want out of life. And he's trying to go against his own nature and is not very good at it. As I said, while the actors hold your attention throughout it, and thankfully it's a nice, lean 90-minute runtime. I miss 90-minute movies so much. which is exactly the right length for this. Not too many of the jokes are big standouts. Like, here's what I'm going to tell you the best joke in the movie, which does come towards the end, but this is not really a spoiler kind of movie. But like this is the best joke in the movie, and everything else is in this vein, but none of the other ones kind of hit this hard. There's a bit towards the end where a car drives off a pier into the water, and it's sinking, and there's all these people who are on the pier looking down, and they're like, oh, somebody should help him. Oh no, like there's tide swirls down. You can just hear all these people going like, oh, there's tide swirls. Well, that water's real cold, coming up with all these reasons why no one's going to go in to try and help this guy. Then they notice some money start to float up, and everybody jumps off the pier into the water to get the money. Like, that, in a nutshell, is this thing's sense of humor, and also its perspective on people. So it's a bit cynical, it's a bit dark, but it has directors who don't know how to fully lean into that. Again, because Zucker, when those three work together, their directorial style is just point the camera and let the jokes speak for themselves. And that works better when the jokes come a hell of a lot more rapid fire than this does. So overall, it's decent. I kind of would have preferred if other people had directed it, because I feel like there's more you could have gotten out of this script, especially with this cast, if it was in the hands of a director who actually felt like adding to the procedures beyond just giving the actors and the script a chance to just show what they can do, which works. The risk of getting a director with more directorial flair is that they get in the way of the stuff that works. They get in the way of the cast or get in the way of the script. I understand that that's a risk, but, just kind of standing back and going, yep, that actor sure did that line. Well, all right, next shot. And just kind of moving on. It just makes me feel like this is solid. It's decent. It could have been more. It could have been more, and I think largely that comes down to it could have used directors with a clearer artistic presence on the thing. But I still had fun with it. And again, cast is perfect in this. Ruthless People. I hadn't seen it before. Not too bad. Not like the full palate cleanser I would have cared for, but definitely a decent note to finish out this run of commissions. I've got so many other commissioned reviews to try and get to. Have you ever seen this movie, though? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon was how I was commissioned to review this, and even if you can't support me that way, like, share, subscribe. Those help me out as well. Don't worry too much about it, though, because we take a relaxed attitude around here. So you can just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Jean Foray, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Linda Walters, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Renabulax the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Kasparov, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toku Bluhuvian, Pao Rabajagal, and Mara G. If you'd like to hear your name in the credits, or even just see them, there are rewards on the Patreon, so maybe check those out.